Hello and welcome to this instructional video on how to measure the mitral annulus for transcatheter mitral valve surgery. So first thing, we're going to open our multiplanar reformat tool. Here I'm using Philips IntelliSpace, and then I'm going to select all of the different phases of the RR cycle that I have acquired. So typically we want an exam that's retrospectively gated, so we want between 0 and 90%. And we're going to open all of those images. I like to use the cardiac CT viewer in IntelliSpace because it allows me to make Synase pretty easily, but pretty much any NPR tool will work. Next up is you want to pull up all of the sequences at the same time and scroll down to the level of the mitral valve. And what you're looking for here is kind of a mid to late diastole. You want to see where the left atrium is the left ventricle is kind of at its maximal diameter right before the left atrium starts to contract. So we can see here on the 80%, the left atrium is a little bit bigger than on the 90%, and you can see that the left ventricle is bigger than the preceding sequences. So this is probably the one we want. This is the one right before end diastole. Here at the 0%, it's probably at the point where the left atrium has already started to relax after the contraction. So we're going to select just the 80%, and we're going to enable our NPR tool. And what we want to do is find the annulus of the mitral valve. So the first thing is to, we have our axial images, is to just kind of scroll up and down and see where we are. It looks like a pretty normal appearing mitral valve. You can see that the left ventricle is pretty dilated, and there's also a apical aneurysm of the left ventricle. So kind of going to the center, or the mid-level of the heart, we're going to place our cursor here on trying to get about the center of the mitral valve annulus. And again, that's gonna move around a little, so it's important that we try to kind of find it a couple different areas. And it's important, notice that I'm selecting this posterior part as opposed to this anterior part. The mitral annulus tends to be a pretty abnormally shaped structure. It's not a complete circle. It kind of dives in and out of a couple different imaging planes. So it's important to try and select this side because it's a little bit less, it doesn't move around as much on the images as the more anterior part does, which tends to be located in a couple different areas. Now, if you rotate that way, you can also rotate the other way. I think let's rotate this way. It'll help create a more visually appealing image at the end. We want kind of a short axis image with our sternum in view, almost like either a short axis or a sagittal image. If we go the other way, you'll see that we're going to end up with something more like a coronal image. That's going to be a little bit problematic in terms of seeing what we want to see. So again, go here. Next, we go to our next viewing plane. This is what was formerly the coronal plane. You can double click on that to make it bigger. You can just also work with it within that smaller window. Either way is fine. And again, so here you're going to scroll to where you see the mitral annulus, kind of move around until you see it in a few different areas, and then come right here, try to find it, and then scroll right there. And go back and forth, a couple different slices. See how the anterior part is kind of diving out? That's because as you know, there's fibrous continuity between the left LVOT and the left ventricle inflow tract. So just scroll around, make sure that this cursor is kind of over the area that we want it to be the whole time. You know, here it looks like maybe I'll move it a little bit, but otherwise pretty good. Double click that again, and this is kind of an iterative process. So we're going to go back to this formerly axial image, scroll to kind of the level of the mid ventricle again, and same kind of thing. Just maneuver. Probably need to maneuver it just a little bit here to get to where we need to be. Next thing, so now that we've maneuvered in the axial and the formerly sagittal plane, the third image that we want will be the short axis kind of image, or the annular view. And you can already see that here that there's kind of this D-shaped annulus. And when you scroll back and forth, you can see it's a nice D shape. Now, we'll make that screen bigger and scroll back and forth and see what's going on. So as I'm going into the image posteriorly, you can see that I'm entering the left atrium. And as I come out of the screen, I'm going to the left ventricle. So the goal is to try and find the annular ring, which is this D, and you want to make sure that there's some degree of myocardium around it. But if you go too far deep like this, it's still relatively D-shaped, but you're actually going to be in the left atrium. And it can be tricky because you can see that the tissues here look pretty similar to the mitral annular ring. So I think somewhere between this slice and this slice is going to be where to go. Probably use this one. And again, so here's the contour of the mitral annulus that you want to follow. So I always like to save a bookmark at this location. I call it TMVR annulus. And then I like to save that. That way I can always come back. If someone says to me later on, hey, I'm not sure I would have chosen that exact location, I could say, well, let me show you what I did. Let's go back to that exact location, and we can take a peek. So next we're going to measure our tip-to-tip distance, which is this, 25 millimeters. And then we're going to measure our SL distance, which is here. That's 33 millimeters. Save an image of that. I will delete that. Delete that. And we'll measure our area and perimeter of the annulus. And this definitely done in an iterative fashion as well. You can see trying to be kind of right on the blood endocardial margin. I don't need the short axis and long axis measurements, and you can see it did a decent job. There's a little bit of blood pool peripheral to the valve annulus, so that's kind of making it a little, that's why you see a little bit of whiteness out there. Probably bring in a couple of these, but overall that's about what you want, actually. Yeah, so nothing major measurement change there. And here's our area of 8.8 centimeters squared, perimeter of 110 millimeters. So again, you save that, and then we'll record those images and send them to PACS later. All right, well that's the basics of it. Other things you can do to kind of visualize the same data, you can go through your different phases. Oh. Whoops. So yeah, you can go through your different phases and kind of keep that same view and make a cine, and that way you can kind of get an idea as to what dynamic changes happen there as well. You can see the annulus is, of course, going to be changing size throughout the cardiac cycle. You can often you'll want to scroll up and down also and assess any amount of calcium on the valve or the annulus. And when you're looking at these cynates, it'll be important to see if there's any time where the left ventricle septum kind of bows and gets in the way there. Usually it doesn't, but you'll see that pretty easily on the cynates. If it were, just kind of look in this area. Again, you can see the big the big apical aneurysm. All right, that's my very long-winded video. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, take care.